resist or obey. Resist, file lawsuits against the Trump administration, or bend over and bend over backwards to obey Donald Trump and be a victim of his retaliation. Those are the choices that are in front of law firms, universities, and other groups, as Donald Trump uses what we used to refer to as the bully pulpit to actually obtain vindictive retribution against entities, organizations, law firms, universities that he thinks are on his enemies list. And I'm going to cover it all right here on Legal AF. Let me contrast two different events that happened in the last 24 hours, one in the last few minutes. First, a major law firm in New York, used to be one of the leaders and thought leaders within the law community, Paul Weiss. I know well. I know people that are leaders there. I know people that were begging to go there after law school. I went to another major law firm like Paul Weiss instead. They've just bent over and decided that because they hired one person who used to work in the Manhattan DA's office, who eventually came out and wrote a book about his plan to prosecute Donald Trump called People versus Trump, Mark Pomerantz, that now, in order to avoid the threat that Donald Trump has made on 14 different law firms to pay them back for not being hired by Donald Trump when he was a criminal defendant. Now they've said they're going to spend $40 million worth of volunteer time of legal services to promote Donald Trump's policies. At the same time, Columbia University, an Ivy League school based in Upper Manhattan, has agreed to all of Donald Trump's demands, including banning masks and turning over a vice provost over departments related to Africa and Middle East, in other words, black and brown departments, to make sure that their teachings, their First Amendment right of expression is monitored and ultimately censored. Obey or file a lawsuit like Perkins Coie, another law firm, has done, and argue that your First Amendment and other rights have been violated. You're on Legal AF. Let's get to it. You have a choice as a business, as an organization, as a not-for-profit, as an education body. Now that Donald Trump has put you on their hit list, he's put you in his crosshairs. He's sent his minions. He's doxed you. He's turned on his internal rapid response team with paid influencers to go after you on TikTok, on social media, on Facebook, on all the rest. You can either stand, draw a line in the sand, and say that the values that are incumbent and implicit within our Constitution, including the First Amendment, are more important than just stroking a check. Or you can bend over and obey, like Facebook, Meta, Amazon, and the rest. We already did the reporting right after the election. Soon thereafter, Facebook/Meta spent millions of dollars, gave it to Donald Trump for his inauguration and for his presidential library because they allegedly deplatformed him when he was being an insurrectionist and saying inappropriate things. Amazon, they decided to get back in Donald Trump's good graces because they owned, or Jeff Bezos owns, the Washington Post, and they paid or overpaid and effectively paid a bribe to Melania Trump of $40 million, 3 times more than anybody else wanted to pay for her documentary. The delta between what it was worth and what they paid, that's a quid pro quo. That's a bribe. So they paid her off because they're more worried about their investors and their shareholders and returning value than fighting a fight against the Trump administration. Fast forward, Donald Trump decided now to go after all the law firms that he, under a fake argument that they are too woke or that they are practicing diversity, equity, inclusion to try to lift people up. Oh my God, that sounds terrible. And now he's got a list apparently of 14 law firms that he doesn't like. I'm sure put there by Stephen Miller, his deputy chief of staff, in conjunction with Boris Epshteyn, who's still advising the president, and others. Included on that list is Perkins Coie, Covington and Burling, and Paul Weiss in New York. Covington and Burling who represents a lot of Democrats and a lot of Democratic elected officials, one of the leading white-collar criminal defense firms in Washington, very politically well-connected. They're considering what to do. I'm sure, if I had a guess, I think they're going to fight it. Perkins Coie in Washington state had no choice. Donald Trump put a giant scarlet letter on them, branded them persona non gratis from the government, wouldn't allow them to continue to represent people before the government, revoked their top secret security clearance, defamed them in a executive order. They've sued in an emergency filing. And a judge, in this case, Beryl Howell, has already ruled earlier in the week that Donald Trump went too far, that he violated the First Amendment, that he's not allowed to be the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland and say, oh, you displease me, off with your head, ha-ha. And she's enjoined them from effectively banning the firm of 2,500 people from government service. Now, fast forward to Paul Weiss, two different Pauls, and Columbia University. And look what they've done and what a mess they've made. The Paul Weiss managing partner, I get it. I get his responsibilities. I've run law firms before. He's worried about his partners. He's worried about his profits per share of partners. He wants it to remain in the $3 million range. He doesn't want to, cut off the fund of money they're using to pay retired partners and to grow the firm. And so rather than fight it, they decide, and they're also one of the leaders of representing Democratic causes, including giving guidance to Kamala Harris and holding fundraisers for others. I mean, they're not apolitical, but they certainly were no friends of Donald Trump. And when they hired Mark Pomerantz, the now disgraced former special prosecutor under Cy Vance in the Manhattan DA's office, who famously, now infamously, noisily quit when Alvin Bragg came in as the Manhattan DA because he didn't think Alvin Bragg was moving fast and furious enough against Donald Trump and prosecuting him for enough things. And so he wrote something in the New York Times, and he wrote a book, People versus Donald Trump, and he got a job as running part of the criminal defense practice over at Paul Weiss. Donald Trump hated that. So there was a rumor that Paul Weiss was going to be on the hit list along with 14 other major firms. Now, the reality is Donald Trump was like a little boy with his nose pressed up against the candy store glass because no big law firm or big law would represent him in his criminal cases at all. In fact, every one of them rejected them, and every lawyer that represented him had to leave his firm in order to represent Donald Trump. And so just now that he's the president, everybody's scared of him, not us, but in general, now some major law firms like Sullivan and Cromwell are now representing Donald Trump, that elite, white shoe firm in New York. Except, they have their own problems because Donald Trump hates diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, then go check out Sullivan and Cromwell's website because they have a gigantic commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion and now representing Donald Trump in some appeals. So Paul Weiss decided, well, we'll give him what he wants because we don't want to be on the blacklist. We've got shareholders, in fact, partners that we need to worry about. We don't want to lose any money. So we're going to give him $40 million worth of free legal service. And let me just do the math for everybody. Let's assume for a minute that the average, even if they put their junior people on it, even if they're junior people, which are about $1,000 an hour, just to do the math here. So $40 million is the equivalent of 40,000 lawyer hours. So the average lawyer in New York is about 2,000 hours. So we're talking about 20 lawyers working round the clock for Donald Trump for free. I mean, they'll get paid by the firm, but for free. On matters that matter to Donald Trump, including fighting anti-Semitism. Look, the things that the president Trump will put them on, I guess, are laudable for now until Trump gets more mad, drunk with power, and then he changes their agenda. But they're saying, we'll fight anti-Semitism, we'll do this. For $40 million worth of free time? I mean, that is extraordinary. And if you divide it by profits per partner, that's a lot of fucking money. That's like $400,000 per partner that they're now just willingly giving to Donald Trump. Columbia University, switching gears for a minute, same problem. Columbia University had a $400 million grant. Now look, none of the Ivy Leagues or other major universities, especially in the Northeast, cover themselves in any glory about how they handled the Hamas protest movement on campus. People know my position about it and my support for Israel. However, there is a First Amendment right of expression. These students aren't allowed to terrorize the Jewish students on campus, but it was up to the university to try to mediate between those two extremes. Whether they did it right or wrong was for the public to, and the tuition-paying public to judge. The Congress called a hearing. Almost all of those Ivy League presidents who testified, almost all of them got fired or quit as a result. So they accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. They got their pound of flesh from the Ivy League. And now Donald Trump wants to hold back. He threatened Columbia with $400 million of not paying them grants for federal funding unless they made major changes, including turning over, basically putting the Middle Eastern, African, and Arab departments into receivership. That was their words, which is now they've agreed to turn them over to a vice provost to censor them and monitor them. This is a higher education. We're not talking about children in elementary school or even in high school. We're talking about college students, Ivy League, who paid to go there. And now they got to, and they're going to, who's going to go to one of those departments? Who's going to major in Middle Eastern studies or African studies at Columbia University with the Trump administration policing the curriculum? Who? You know, this is totalitarianism. This is fascism. It's disgusting to watch. And just because they were, what they needed to do is suck it up and say, no, we're going to wait it out. We're not, you can take our $400 million from us. We'll get our money somewhere else. Let a company or corporation or a private citizen step forward and help them out, or raise tuition a bit, or cut something else, close something else, not the Middle Eastern studies or African studies, but say no, because it's right. Because you don't want to obey in the area of academic freedom and First Amendment expression. But that's what they've chosen to do in New York. You know, it is disgusting. And the stakes are so high to see anybody bending over and obeying Donald Trump. Just wait it out. He's going to be gone eventually. And if we do this right, he's going to be lame duck. And you can completely ignore him in less than 2 years at the midterms, which should be, at the rate he's going, a bloodbath for MAGA and for Donald Trump. Give me the House and the Senate, and I will give you fill in the blank in comments, an impeachment and a conviction, and send Donald Trump packing. But in the meantime, these law firms, these universities, and others are so short-sighted about making money now, not losing money now. Think long term. Think about the ramifications, the consequences of your action. A judge that I admire, Judge Coffenor up in San Francisco, he was the one who issued the first injunction against Donald Trump. I know there's 60 or 70 of them now, but he was the first. It's hard to remember that 5 days into the administration when he blocked birthright citizenship from being ripped out of the Constitution by executive order. But he also said this is a moment in time where we don't want to have future generations look back and say about 2025 and beyond, where were the judges? Where were the lawyers? How did they let this happen? And the chapter that's now going to be written about Columbia University and Paul Weiss, the law firm in New York, is not going to be favorable to them. They bent, not to the arc of history, but they bent the knee to a tyrant. And we are lesser as a community and as a democracy for it. I'm Michael Popok. You're on Legal AF. Take a moment, hit the free subscribe button. Join us on Legal AF, the podcast, on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, of course, on hot takes like this right here on the Legal AF MTN YouTube channel. Till my next reporting, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states. lawsuits and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.